Welcome to part one of our legal strategies to address coerced debt in Texas. My name is Carla Sanchez Adams, and I am a managing attorney at Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid. In this first part, we're going to cover coerced debt and identity theft in Texas. We're going to, if you see, there's a brief overview of what we're going to cover. So the definition of coerced debt, and then the definition of identity theft in Texas, how to pull a credit report to get information about identity theft or coerced debt, and then utilizing the specific Texas statute that we have, which is unique to other states in the US, to get a declaratory judgment that a person is a victim of identity theft. And that's in our Texas Business and Commerce Code, Chapter 521. So first, what is coerced debt? Coerced debt is defined as any non-consensual credit-related transaction that occurs within an abusive, intimate relationship. And although it's defined this way, we have found that coerced debt also happens in other violent and abusive relationships. So it occurs in elder abuse, where it's a caretaker or a family member who's caring for the elderly client. We've also found that this is true with victims of child abuse. So with foster youth, or even foster parents or biological parents will use the information of the foster youth to take out credit or debt. So the definition is pretty broad, and that's because credit-related transactions are very broad. So you can use credit to get credit cards. That's the most obvious one, and that's also the most common one because it's the easiest form of credit to take out. The second is auto loans. And then there are other types of credit-related transactions that can be payday loans, which could be, or high-cost lending, which could be title loans, payday loans, other new forms of credit that can be taken out for, like now that there's types of early payment for checks, like things like earning, where you can deposit your paycheck in advance into this new account and it will charge you fees. So that's a way of diverting funds from a survivor or victim of domestic violence into the hands of an abuser. Utilities, student loans, mortgages. There's so many different types of credit-related transactions that exist. And so coerced debt really covers the gamut of all of these different types of transactions. So the challenge becomes, how do you address these when consumer protection laws vary depending on the type of transaction? So credit cards are governed by one statute, auto loans are governed by something else. And so my hope is that this presentation will give you one holistic remedy, which is that Texas Business and Commerce Code Chapter 521, getting that order. That's one step. In part two and part three, we'll focus on the credit reporting aspect. And so that's also a holistic aspect of approaching coerced debt and identity theft, blocking the reporting or deleting the reporting of these accounts in a victim's credit report. And then part three is more specific to the collection or the liability of the underlying debt, and specific state and federal statutes we can use for those. So we'll go more in depth into each of these types of transactions when we head into part three. So again, coerced debt, this occurs in an abusive relationship. And so it is this pattern of coercive control where the abuser asserts dominance and control over an individual. And so in the context of credit, they do it through two main avenues, which is either fraud or duress. So the fraud bucket is traditional identity theft. The survivor didn't know about it, didn't consent to it, didn't sign anything, never used it. It's, it would be the same as some complete stranger using their information to open up credit accounts. The second, the duress part, is the part of coerced debt which is more novel and more difficult historically to address in our legal system. And so that's where a survivor knew about it, so they did sign it, they did take that account out, or sign that loan, or give that debit card or credit card over to their abuser, but they did it under duress. So there was a threat of violence or a threat of some bad consequence happening if they said no. And so this has become more and more common because of, the growth and depersonalization of the credit system. So as many of you know, you can just obtain things online instantaneously, never meeting someone face to face, never confirming the identity of the person, so long as you have their social security number, their date of birth, and other information like their current address. You can pretty much use it to take out anything that you want to. So the effects of coerced debt and I'll go through these really quickly, or the reason why we should care about coerced debt and why it's important is because there's studies that have shown that women specifically, because the most amount of reported cases in the context of domestic violence are women, this happens with men as well, is they stay in these abusive relationships because of financial dependence. So they cannot, when they leave, when they flee an abusive situation, they do not have the economic security to be able to have their own form of housing or have their own form of transportation. Many times they don't have employment, or they've lost their job because of the violence, or they don't have childcare. There's so many different financial barriers. And so coerced debt, by it, and the second point here, credit reporting problems, by it being and appearing on a victim's credit report, that prohibits the person from taking out new credit if their credit is damaged. So for example, if the abuser takes out 6 credit card accounts in the name of the victim, and all of them are overdrawn, all of them are in collections, that's going to impact the credit score of the survivor. So they're not going to be able to either rent housing or get a car if they need a car for transportation, get a cell phone, be able to turn on utilities. So if they, if in the past the abuser used the name of the survivor to put a utilities account that is in default, they won't be able to open a new one. So there's all of these problems that happen because of coerced debt. So now, one of the things that that's unique, again, that I mentioned to Texas, is that we can avail ourselves of the identity theft protections that exist in Texas that are unique to Texas for survivors of coerced debt as of September 1st, 2021. So the law in Texas defining identity theft in our penal code used to be essentially what you see on the screen, but without that effective consent that is underlined in purple. So that basically was just your traditional identity theft. Didn't know about it, didn't consent to it. But by adding an effective consent, that again, this became effective 9/1 of 2021, or I'm sorry, 9/1 of 2019, forgive me. This became effective in the Penal Code in 9/1 of 2019. By doing so, and in introducing this effective consent piece, you see that the definition means that it's not effective consent, isn't effective if it was induced by force, threat, or fraud. So that encompasses all of coerced debt, right? If they did it, they signed it, but it was induced by force, threat, or fraud, then they now can be considered a victim of identity theft based on our definition under the Texas Penal Code. Again, I do want to stress this was effective 9/1 of 2019. So if the debt happened, it was taken out before that date, the person cannot obtain a police report. This is just for obtaining a police report reporting identity theft. So if it happened on 9/1, 2019 or afterwards, they can get a police report declaring they're a victim of identity theft. However, if this happened specifically with a credit card or a debit card, and it doesn't matter if it happened before 9/1 of 2019 or after 9/1 of 2019, they can assert, go report to the police station, credit card or debit card abuse. So it had to have happened to a credit card account or a debit card account. And because this did have that effective consent piece in it. So basically you see here the definition is with the intent to obtain a benefit fraudulently, somebody presents or uses a credit card or debit card with knowledge the card hasn't been issued to them and it's not used with the effective consent of the card holder. So again, if the coerced debt had been credit card or debit card prior to 9/1 of 2019, this is the avenue that you would take. Now, this definition of identity theft in the Texas and Business Commerce Code, Chapter 521, which is our identity theft statute in Texas, this is what was amended in 9/1 of 2021. So the definition was changed in our penal code in September 1st, 2019, and then here in our civil code in September 1st of 2021. So this included that effective consent piece that you see down here in A1. And it also included this new portion here, not just induced by force, threat, fraud, or coercion, but also to encompass other types of victims of coerced debt. So you see here, given by a person who by reason of youth, mental illness, or intellectual disability is known by the actor to be unable to make reasonable decisions. So that would include, again, foster youth or elderly clients who may not have intellectual capacity for reasons of a number of reasons that dementia and the like. So now that we have the definition of identity theft kind of clear in our mind that we can use for victims of coerced debt, either filing a police report after, if it happened from 9/1 of 2019 to 9/1 of 2021, or from 9/1 of 2021 on, no need to get a police report because now it's in our civil statute. So that's identity theft defined, the practicals of, how do you prove that someone is a victim of identity theft? How can you get supporting documentation? You can get that police report if it happened 9/1/2019 to any point thereafter, or you cannot get a police report if for some reason your victim is concerned about contacting law enforcement, but you could seek to get a Chapter 521 order, which we'll go through in a minute, and that will be an order declaring the person a victim of identity theft. Before getting to that piece of the 521 and the practicals of how you file it, what you need, I wanted to highlight how you get a credit report, because the information contained in the credit report is necessary and key to filing in the 521, as well as in a police report, or alternatively, an identity theft report that you can obtain through the Federal Trade Commission's website, idtheft.gov. And part of that is you want to be comprehensive in what you list has resulted from identity theft. And that includes coerced debt as well, right? So the pieces that were coerced, and that can be anything from accounts that the client never knew of or existed, as well as those she did know about, or false phone numbers, false addresses that may be associated with the accounts that the abuser took out without her knowledge or permission. So the first step in getting that credit report is by going through annualcreditreport.com. And the reason you want to go to just this website and not any other website is because this is free, absolutely free. You can get a copy of all 3 of your credit reports from TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax at least once for free every 12 months. Currently, as of today, we're in March of 2022, because of the pandemic, you're able to actually get one of these reports every week for free on this website. You cannot do it every week for free if you write to get it or call to get it from the 3 agencies, but you can on this website. And so if you see on this page, it says to get it by phone, here's the number you call. To get it by mail, you click here, which is download the request form, print and complete the form. In addition to the form being, what it is, you want to provide supporting documentation. And the reason I'm saying that is because for victims of identity theft, often they cannot access this report online. They don't answer the security questions correctly because they don't know of the accounts that they're asking about. And so then they have to request it by mail, and they have to prove their identity. So that includes a current photo ID, driver's license is best, or anything that has a photo ID and their current address, the copy of their social security card. Or if they don't have a social security card, then a W-2 or some other letter or document that has their social security number on it. And then if their current address isn't what is on the photo ID, either a copy of a utility bill or a bank statement that has their current address. And here's the address to where you would send that to. So once you click get it online, then you want to check these 3 boxes to get from each of the consumer reporting agencies. And the reason you want to get all 3 is because they often look different, and some of them have information reported that is not on one of the other ones. So you can have, for example, an account that lists the consumer as an authorized user that's reported on Equifax, but it's not reported on TransUnion, and you would want that, to make sure that is, if it's theirs, that it's fine. If it's not, that you have that removed, as well as other information like employment history or address variations, or even something that's called inquiries. And we'll get into these in part 2 more, what's in a report and what's accurate and what's not. But this is how you obtain them. You go there. The next thing is, once you get those reports, you want to make sure that you save them, you download them as PDFs, you save them, you encrypt them and protect them, because it does have a lot of personal identifying information that belongs to the survivor. You want to make sure they have a copy of it. This is something that you can do with the survivor if they don't have access to the internet, or they may not speak English. But alternatively, you can let them do it on their own and then send it to you and review it with them. You want to make sure they have access to this information and they keep it safe as well. So when you pull it and review it, these are some screening questions that we have here. I'm not going to go through all of them right now, but it's questions like, once you go through, is this account, this trade line here, it's saying there's a credit card account with Bank of America. Do you recognize this account? No. Then, if they don't, you can find out some more information, keep digging and asking, it may be a retail card and they just didn't know that Bank of America, provided that service. So you would ask, oh, it's a JCPenney card. Did you ever have a credit card with JCPenney or something like that? And then, if they do recognize the account, they say, yeah, that's mine, then you can ask questions about the circumstances surrounding the opening of account to listen to see whether it's coerced or not. Like, did you ever feel like you had to do it? Were you concerned and pressured? Some of these questions that you can ask. And then it's also important to note that not every type of debt is going to appear on a credit report. So, there could be high cost loans that don't appear. There could be utilities that, for example, an account with AT&T that's not reported, because generally those don't appear on the credit reports unless they're already delinquent. And they're generally reported by a debt collector, not AT&T themselves or T-Mobile or things of the like. So you can also ask about that if they know about other debt. Because again, you want to be as thorough as possible when you're preparing the police report or the ID theft report with the FTC or the 521 petition. You want to list everything on there. So if it's not on the credit report, you want to make sure to dig deeper and ask more questions to see if there's other accounts. So now I'm going to get into the nuts and bolts of Chapter 521. So again, this is unique to Texas. It is holistic because it is essentially a declaratory judgment by a court saying this person is a victim of identity theft, and here's all of the information that resulted from that theft. That doesn't need only include financial accounts. It can include criminal information. So if a person fraudulently used your identity and when they were stopped by the police in the middle of a crime, that could be something that is included on this order. And so to be able to avail yourself of the 521, you have to either have a police report. So it says, a criminal complaint alleging an offense under Texas Penal Code 32.51, which is the definition of identity theft that we went over earlier. Or, sorry, I'm gonna skip over that. Or the injured by a violation of 521.051, which is that civil code definition of identity theft in this chapter that we went over earlier. So that's why I was saying, if it happened before the definition changed in the Texas Business and Commerce Code, which was September 1st of 2021, you're gonna have to have that criminal complaint. You're gonna have to have that police report. So again, that's from September 1st of 2019 on. Going back. So this is the actual, the whole Identity Theft Enforcement and Protection Act. And you can see it's broken out by the different sections. And so the ones that we're going to cover that are important for purposes of today's presentation is the definition of personal identifying information, or PII, and an identity theft victim and all of those different things. And then skipping over to this court order declaring the person to be a victim of identity theft. So those are the ones that we're going to be focusing on. The other two sections are about breach notifications, with a business who didn't safeguard information, and AG enforcement and how they can use the Deceptive Trade Practices Act. So we're not going to cover that today, but that's the outline of the code. So protective or personal identifying information and sensitive PII, these need to be protected, and it is defined here. And so it is generally those things like, your first and last name, your social security number, your driver's license number, your date of birth, your address, your phone number. It's very, very broad. And then the sensitive PII, that's, medical information. So like there's a higher degree of responsibility for that. So for businesses and, for doctors and things of the like, but both of those are defined here. And for our purposes, for our clients, generally, it's going to be PII that is used rather than the sensitive PII. So you see here, there's all of those things that I just went over, including biometric data and telecommunication access devices. So that includes like a debit card, a credit card, things of the like. So 521.051, this is what we discussed about getting the order. So what you want to do, kind of the nuts and bolts of this, is you want to file a petition, and it's going to be in a district court. It can't be in county court. It can't be in JP court. It must be in district court. It can be where the victim lives, where the identity theft occurred, or where the imposter lives, so the abuser lives. And generally, I mean, for the sake of pre-pandemic, you wanted to do it, had to do it in person, not by Zoom. So always the most convenient was where the identity theft victim lived. And generally, that's also where the identity theft occurred, unless they fled the abusive situation and it happened in another state or another city. And in the petition itself, you want to be careful not to include the information that resulted from the identity theft, because it is public record. So you don't want to put, oh, here's their social, their, the account numbers and the password, all of those things you don't want to put in the petition, but plead enough to say, this is what happened. This person's a victim of identity theft. We're seeking this order. And we do have sample petitions that the Texas Coalition on Coerced will have, and you can use to do your petition. So that application you file along with the proposed order. So when you file it, you don't have to serve anybody. So there's no notice of service. There's nothing of that has to happen with the petition. You want to include that proposed order. That proposed order does have all of the information in there. That order will then be sealed. So once you get it signed, you treat it as gold. The victim needs to keep it. You need to keep it safe, because you won't be able to get copies of it. It will be sealed. So you file those with the court. And sometimes you have to call the clerk to assist with the e-filing, because when you e-file something, it asks what type of lawsuit and who to serve. And so because there's no opposing party, there's no defendant, there may be issues. And so sometimes you want to just call the clerk and help you to do that correctly. Then once it's been filed and you have confirmation of that, you want to set a hearing. Prior to the hearing, you do have to give notice. So again, it's not service. You don't have to serve someone like you do with a lawsuit, but you do have to provide notice. So that's by written mail, first-class mail, fax, email, if you know it, and or certified mail to then if you know who the abuser is or the imposter, or anyone who will receive the order. That includes all the creditors. So in a case that we had in 2021, it was by Zoom. And so because it was by Zoom, one of the creditors, don't remember if it was, I think it might have been Bank of America, the attorney for them just showed up and said, I'm just here to observe, because they had never been to one before. So you send notice to all of the potential creditors, credit card companies, auto loans, mortgages, whatever the account may be. So you send them notice of this, and where you send them notice is where you would also serve them. And then generally you have to do that before the hearing, like a reasonable period. That could be 3 days. I generally do it as soon as I know that there's a hearing. So within 7 to 14 business days. And then once you have that hearing, it is, again, it's a prove up. If any of you have ever done a divorce or any other kind of prove up, there's no opposing party. So you don't have to be afraid of leading questions. So you would draft it up like, please state your name for the record, and Miss so-and-so, are you a victim of identity theft? Yes. Are these, is this account, did you open this account? No. Is this account the result of identity theft? Yes. What about, is this your address? No. Do you believe that was from identity theft? Yes. So you would go through all of the things that you're putting in the order and ask them to say that that's not theirs. It's as a result of identity theft. And you want to mark and admit any documentary evidence, ahead of time. So there is, still that if you have, for example, collection letters or billing statements or anything like that that you want to mark and introduce. And I think that what's interesting about this is that I haven't yet had a case, because this is relatively new, where it's solely coerced debt. And when I say that, the coercion piece and not the identity theft piece. So I suspect that there will be, if that happens for your clients, that you will have to develop the facts a bit more on that prove up. If you actually know, this is the person, this is my abuser, and you'll have to serve notice to that person. You may not have a current address for them, so you do your best, because again, it's not service, it's just the notice. So you wouldn't have to get a motion for substitute service or anything like that if you don't know their address. Just a good faith effort to provide notice to them. And then you would develop the facts of this person, like the domestic violence. A lot of times if you have a protective order, saying you have a protective order against them, that helps a lot. And, in our client's case, the one that I said recently where the creditor appeared, she'd already had a PO against them. So that helped. And saying, that the domestic violence or the sexual assault or whatever piece happened. And as a part of that, there was also, they forced them to do this and how they were afraid and why they did that. And, because you're developing it in your petition and saying that this is how identity theft is defined, and they fit that part of the definition under either the Business Commerce Code, if it was after 9/1/2021, or the Penal Code, if it was before after 9/1/2019, but before 9/1 of 2021. You're going to develop that through the testimony. And, most of the time judges are very sympathetic. They're not very familiar with the statute. They're not very familiar with these cases. And so, the last one that we had, the judge, apologized to the client and said, "I'm so sorry that you went through this. I hope that now that you have this order, you'll be able to, recover and move on with your life." And so they're really good cases and really simple cases to bring because there is no adversary. And, step 5, get a copy of that signed order. Again, mentioned this before, but because it's the gold, the key that you will need for doing disputes and fighting the creditors, both collection and reporting, it's key that you get that signed order and keep it.